So to start off, as I'm a video storyteller, I feel most comfortable sharing my story through video. So first thing I'll like to do is to play a video.
The stories we tell ourselves become the lens through which we see our world. The stories we tell each other become the voice through which we speak our truth. The stories we tell the world become the hope through which we make our future. So, what stories are you telling to make a difference? We live in a moment where technology has shifted and placed the power of story in our own hands. Now we can find, make, and share our own stories for impact. Together, we can disrupt the status quo, show what's possible, and reach the tipping point of movements. We can change the narrative and change the world. We are all storytellers. What story will you tell?
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. Thank you. Took a while to remember that one. Good day, my name's Natasha, and today I'm joining you from Australia, a country a little bit far away, and you may recognise this incredible landmark, Uluru. Uluru is sacred to the Indigenous people of our country. I don't live anywhere near Uluru. I live in Sydney, which is a beautiful coastal city, and it is Gadigal land. That's the name of the Indigenous people of Sydney who have looked after that land for tens of thousands of years. And so I'd like to pay respects to them as somebody who works on that land and lives on that land. I'm so happy to be joining you here today. It's my first time in Korea, and I feel so thankful that I can be a part of this, to hear about all of the incredible things happening here on the ground and all of the incredible change that's being driven by people like yourselves. I should probably tell you a little bit about myself and my background. So I am a storyteller and a filmmaker. I believe in the power of using storytelling to drive social and environmental change, to create a better future by sharing all of the amazing things that are already happening and encouraging people to get behind those initiatives. I was telling somebody this morning that I started off actually studying print media. So my dream was to work at a newspaper, but these days newspapers barely exist. So that dream was not going anywhere. Instead, I ended up, while I was at university, doing an internship in Bhutan, out of all places, at one of the first private newspapers there. And I was so inspired by what was happening in the media in this country where they measure gross national happiness. And the newspapers and the media there saw their role as promoting gross national happiness. After that, when I came back home to Australia, I saw the newspapers and the media in Australia, and for anybody who is familiar with the media in Australia, you'll know that it's not a very happy environment. So instead, I decided that I wanted to work with non-profits and social enterprises, community organisations, to help them to share their stories. So one of the jobs that I found most defining in my journey as a storyteller and as a filmmaker was at a crowdfunding platform called Start Some Good, which is a social and environmental impact crowdfunding platform. So organisations of all different types, so social enterprises, non-profits, community organisations, raise funds on there. And it was so interesting to see that the organisations that were most successful in their fundraising were those not that necessarily had the most impact, but those that could communicate that impact, those that could communicate the change that they were having on the ground, and they could tell that story well. And in particular, they could tell that story well through video. So I thought we need to be getting video into more of the hands of the organisations that are doing great work on the ground. That for me was so important. And that's how I ended up reaching out to the people who are now my colleagues at Digital Storytellers. We started off as a group of friends interested in filmmaking for social change. Along the journey, we ended up getting clients and turning into a social enterprise. So that was 6 years ago. And now we're a sustainable social enterprise and a certified B Corporation. We have 9 full-time employees on the ground. We work across Australia, New Zealand, we've worked in Singapore, Vietnam, now we've visited here Korea, which is amazing. And we've worked with organisations from small social enterprises to large non-profits to, you know, the G8 Task Force on Impact Investing, all about using storytelling for social change. So we do film production, and I was saying before, actually, one of the first social impact bonds in Australia, we were asked to make a 1-minute video explainer to explain social impact bonds, which was quite difficult, but I think it just shows the importance of, yes, you need the data and the facts, but being able to tell the story around those data and the facts is so important. We also run workshops to teach people to create their own stories because we believe that everybody has a story to tell. And with things like smartphones, video storytelling is becoming more and more democratized. So we believe that we want to hear all of those stories from different and diverse voices. And we also do graphic facilitation, so all about showing the story and not just telling the story. So I guess the big question here is that we're at a conference talking about measuring change and identifying change. So why are we talking about storytelling? Well, we believe it is an absolutely crucial part of communicating your impact, communicating the change that you are having. Even if we talk about the talk that we just had, you know, if you talk about weight loss, you can say, okay, I've lost 3 kilos. But then you ask the question, what does it actually feel like to be fitter? You know, how do you feel when you can put on an outfit and feel great about the way you look? These are some of the things that aren't necessarily captured in data and numbers, but which can be communicated through story. If you think about your brain, this is what your brain looks like when you're engaging with facts and data. So in talking about communicating impact, if you know, say, for example, we've reduced the homelessness rate by 20%, say, for example. These are the areas of your brain that will light up. In comparison, if you start putting information in a time and a place, when you attach emotion to it and sensory information, this is what your brain looks like. So neurologically, we as humans are hardwired to engage much more deeply through story, through emotion. So even if you talk about homelessness, if you start talking about, okay, well, what does it mean for somebody who was homeless before and now has a home? What does it mean to them to have somewhere to go home to at the end of the day, to have somewhere to rest? How has this impacted on their lives? When you combine these two, the data with the story, it is such a powerful way to communicate. And earlier in the opening address, there was a discussion around trust and trust in impact organisation and NGOs. I really do believe that alongside measurement, that stories are also a powerful way to develop trust and engagement with supporters, with stakeholders, by putting that data and information into a way of communicating that can be received by that audience. So at Digital Storytellers, when we talk about storytelling, we talk about using those stories to touch hearts, shift minds, and get the hands to follow and take action. So we believe that storytelling is not only about communicating change, but also about driving more change by being able to see the change that has already happened. So this can drive everything from sparking conversation, creating awareness, engaging fundraising, and advocacy as well. And to put in the words of the incredible climate change activist Naomi Klein, we believe that storytelling has the powerful tool of being able to show what a better future looks like. By being able to tell the stories of all the incredible things that you're doing on the ground, we can show the rest of the world what does a better future look like? What does positive change look like? And that is what drives people to take action when they can see a better future, when they have hope. So some powerful ingredients of a great story. This is an acronym that I use to remember. So alongside data, stories can transport you somewhere. They create empathy. They grab your attention in a short amount of time. They're usually broken up into segments, which makes them easy to digest in the current age when people have such short attention spans. They humanize the data, so they make you connect in with an individual. So they make you engage with a person, and they prime you for action. So these are the powerful ingredients of when you put information and data into a story, how can that communicate better? So at Digital Storytellers, we really do believe that planning is so much of the part of the process of storytelling. It's not just once the cameras get turned on that the magic happens. You have to really be thinking about, okay, how is this story going to be used? What am I trying to communicate here, and to who? And so we do that at Digital Storytellers using the story canvas. So this is something that we developed at Digital Storytellers as a way of thinking about story. Put quick hands up, who has used the business model canvas before, or the lean canvas? Anyone? A few people? A few hands shot up there. Just waiting to see the translation catch that. So this is the same concept, the idea that if you think about a story that you have to tell, some change that you've seen within the work you do with your organisation, you put a timer on for 10 minutes, have a go at filling out this story canvas and thinking about, okay, why do I need to share this story? Who am I sharing this story with? What are the people and places that are going to resonate with that audience? What's the style and tone of the story that I'm trying to convey here? And of course, very importantly, what outcomes and indicators, what impact would I like to see come out of this story as well? Because it's just as important to be measuring the impact of your story as it is to be communicating what you've already measured so far. So this is something that we use at Digital Storytellers to be really strategic around impact-driven storytelling. Rather than just telling a story that feels good or is inspirational, tell a story that is impactful and strategic. We also find it really useful for if you are working in a team, literally getting on the same page about the story that you're telling. As the previous speaker also talked about, sometimes within organizations, you could have the CEO and then the communications person and the marketing person, and then somebody working in the field talking about what they think is the same story, but actually it comes out very differently from different voices. So we find it really useful for aligning on what story are you sharing with your stakeholders and with your audience. So very much encourage you to think about a story you'd like to tell and have a go at using the story canvas to actually share that story. And for those of you who are coming to the workshop later in the day, we'll be getting hands-on with this and using it to actually map out some of your stories. So we believe that powerful storytelling should always have a balance of head, heart, and hands. So actually, there was some really interesting research done of the most watched TED Talks of all time, and that research showed that actually 65% of those TED Talks engaged with the emotions. They were the life stories of the people who were telling, who were giving the TED Talks. And then it was 20% of those stories engaged with the head. So they were the facts and the data, the rational arguments. And then that left the remaining very small percentage of the story of the TED Talk, which was about the credibility of the storyteller. So I think it's just a great example of how much you actually do need to use the heart alongside the head and the information and the data to actually communicate effectively. So we're just going to watch an example of one story that we did very early on at Digital Storytellers, one of our very first, so it's a bit old, a bit dated actually I think, but I think it's a good example of how something which is a statistic can actually be communicated through a personal story.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the family that donated their child's organs and saved my life using such a precious gift.
I've got 4 children. Mohammed is the youngest. He's a bit cheeky boy. He gets around his opposition very well.
When I was 3, I was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy. It's something that wraps around the bottom of your heart and makes it grow too large from the top. I couldn't eat properly, which means I didn't grow like all my mates.
His face is swollen, his stomach is big.
During school time, I watched my friends play soccer for about 4 years and I couldn't play, I just got a chair and watched.
Before his heart transplant, he was a bit shy. I noticed all the time when I'm in a shopping centre, people look at him as a different person.
It was a struggle, a very big struggle.
At some stage, we knew that the only thing can save Mohammed's life is a heart transplant.
When I was 9, I was put on the waiting list and I had to wait for a heart that would fit into my chest and grow with me as I grew.
We were told by the doctors that Mohammed has only 6 months to live. The phone rang.
My mum felt that it was from the hospital, she knew it.
After we received the call, we made our way to the airport.
We went down to my cousin's place, said bye to all my cousins.
Everyone was crying that he's going. We don't know if he's coming back or not. At the same time, it was good news. He was dying anyway. It was an hour and 15 minutes to Melbourne, but it felt like 6 months.
I asked the doctor one question, that was, what are my chances?
The nurse asked him, "Aren't you worried?" He said no. She said, "This is the first person I've ever seen that he's going to get his heart exchanged and he's not worried." My wife and myself kissed him goodbye.
My life was saved by someone else that donated their organs, and I donated my heart valves and saved someone else. When I think about the child that I gave my heart valves to, I feel pretty excited for him and for me that I didn't need them anymore. And now he's playing around with his mates, having fun. It might be a she.
So we're looking forward for Mohammed to become maybe a lawyer or whatever he likes to be.
I want to be a soccer player like Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm very grateful and thankful for the family that donated their child's organs to save my life and to help me. Please talk to your family about organ donation and tell them about your decision.
So I just wanted to show that as an example of the fact that in there you saw the statistics. So each organ donor can save up to 7 lives. And that, yes, is an incredible statistic. But what that doesn't communicate is how it impacts the lives of those people who are saved. It doesn't communicate how that is now allowing young Mohammed to play soccer with his mates, which he couldn't do before. It doesn't communicate the impact that that has had on the family. And these are all bits of information and parts of the story which really are the things that we'll remember. I didn't remember that statistic until I watched it up there on the screen, and I'm worried that I'm going to forget it in a moment as well. But I will remember Muhammad, and that's what will stay with me. So I think it is so important for all of the incredible work that you do to ensure that you are communicating your story around the change that you're creating in the world. I'm sure if I asked you about what is the most important and meaningful change that you have created through your work, yes, there may be some statistics and data in there, but I'm sure much of it will be around the impact you've had on people, the impact you've had on the world around you and society. And these are things which can be communicated through story and narrative and not necessarily just through numbers. The other reason I just wanted to show that as well is that I think it's a good example of when the client came to us, they just wanted a general story around a family who has been affected by organ donation. But through using the story canvas, we were able to get much more strategic and specific about the right story to tell by asking, okay, who is the audience? In this case, it was the culturally and linguistically diverse community in Sydney, so people from multicultural backgrounds, which meant we needed to show a family which was from a multicultural background. People want to see themselves in story. For the research had showed that grim and kind of somber and sad stories around organ donation didn't really actually work with the audience. So it was quite intentional that the style and tone of the story be hopeful and positive and vibrant. The key messages in there were specifically targeted at the concerns of the multicultural community in Sydney, in New South Wales, in Australia, and the things that they think about, rather than just, okay, what does the client, in this case, Transplant Australia, want to say? It was about what would be most meaningful for the audience to hear, not just what do they want to put out there as the messages. So I think it's just a good example of being strategic and intentional and thoughtful around how you share information and share stories. I'm going to skip the next one, even though it's a beautiful story. It's because of time, but do check it out. It's about Royal National Park. So we'll just jump through the end for time. I guess the last message that I want to leave you with, though, is today is that it is around the democratization of storytelling. In the past, it was really the big organizations, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Apples of the world, that had the resources and the power to tell powerful stories. However, with the changing technology that we have, with the incredible use of smartphones, which now are used to create feature films for Cannes Film Festival, there really truly is the opportunity for all different types of organizations to be sharing their stories. And I think yourselves as organizations and individuals doing amazing work, you have an incredible advantage in this because you are already living and working with and witnessing amazing stories. So I very much encourage you to share those stories, to inspire others to get involved and get behind the action that you are taking. Just talking about smartphones. So this is somebody we worked with at Digital Storytellers. She took part in our workshops. She is a social housing resident in Sydney. And the social housing, we can talk about, okay, there's been an increase of 25% in social housing for residents in Sydney, but nobody can tell the story that Lily can tell of how that allows her to look at the sunset on her balcony in the afternoon. She's the only one that can tell that story. So I think it's so important to open up who is sharing stories within your organizations. This is Kayla. She goes diving with sharks. Can you believe it? She's 14 years old. So we can talk about how, our oceans have been rehabilitated and, the reduction in plastic. But only Kayla can tell the story of how does that change her experience of going diving with sharks in our beautiful Sydney oceans. And this is Raymond, and so we can talk about, the increased statistic of, increased in 30% of Indigenous rangers working on country, but only Raymond can tell the story of how this has allowed him to continue working on the country that his family have worked on in millennia for thousands and thousands of years. Only he can share that story, and it's so powerful. So the last thing I'd just like to leave you with is to ask you, what story are you sharing about the change you're making? And to have a little think about that. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute honour, and I look forward to meeting lots of you throughout the conference. Thank you.